Hey guys, what is up? Welcome to the Guilty as Charged podcast. My name is Steven. I am your host. Joining me as always are my guys Tyler and Alex. Alex, we'll start with you, man. How you doing today?
I am doing pretty swell.
Great. Awesome news. Tyler, how you doing, man?
I'm doing very well. I have to start by saying hello to fellow Chargers Guilty as Charged podcast fan, Reggie. It turns out he works at the same PT clinic that my fiance works out. Turns out he's a big fan. So Reggie, keep up the good work.
Wow. Awesome news. Small world.
Mhm.
I have successfully recruited a bunch of people at my new job to listen to the podcast. So Mr. Lieber and Mr. Kirby, if you're listening, what's up? All right, got a fun show planned for you guys today, talking about the upcoming matchup with the Chargers and the Chiefs. Definitely a game that I think a lot of people had circled on the calendar. But first and foremost, have to give a shout out to our guy Quest Designs. We just had the collaboration drop. It is on our Twitter page as well as his. So please go support Quest. You can find him on Twitter at Quest360 Designs. If you use the code GUILTY10 to purchase any of his stickers, you get 10% off your order. And he's a big Chargers fan. So go support him and support the show. We do really appreciate that. All right, let's talk. Let's jump right into these storylines for week 3. Let's start off. Tyler, I'll ask you first. What's kind of your big storyline of the week for the Chargers and Chiefs matchup?
I could go a number of different ways here, but I wanted to go something a little bit different. And I want to know, especially after watching the All 22, will Brandon Staley rotate out some of his first round picks on defense to protect this defense? And obviously, I'm not talking about Joey Bosa or Derwin James, but in this case, potentially Jerry Tillery and Kenneth Murray. Each of them will absolutely have a role on this defense. And I think in particular, Murray will be just fine down the line. But they've been a bit of a rough watch the past 2 games. And I know these situations are different and very different, but the best thing the Chargers ever did for Denzel Perryman was play him less. And I think at some point, if it's Covington and Jones out there instead of Tillery, or Tranquil out there instead of Murray, even though I don't know if that's quite the rotation, I don't think that happens this game, but it sounds like they do want to do it with Tranquil. And Steven, you pointed out in your tweet, Brandon Staley reiterated today that he still feels like linebacker Drew Tranquil is a starting caliber player, and that he said they're planning to get him on the field more and more each week. Does that happen this week? I'm not quite sure, but I'm very curious to see, especially after they've watched now 2 games, do we start pulling some guys out? Now, if Justin Jones isn't healthy, maybe leave Tillery more, but if Jones is healthy and Tranquil is doing just fine, do they get more snaps this week? I'm not quite sure, but I'd love to see some changes there, I think, at least on early downs.
Yeah, before I'll let Alex talk about Jerry Tillery and Justin Jones for a second, and obviously you can talk about the linebackers too, but it just felt like Murray was having a weird game. And then watching the film, it did not paint a very pretty picture. It painted a picture of someone who did not trust their instincts, someone who was not really diagnosing what was happening in front of him. And, obviously the All 22 is not available for everybody, but, once you're able to get your hands on it, I would definitely encourage anybody to go and watch the difference in Kaiser White and Kenneth Murray and even Drew Tranquil. Like, Kenneth Murray is not in a good space mentally. He had the great play in the 4th quarter when he, knifed through and tackled Zeke for a tackle for loss, which was a great play. But the consistency in just like the mental capacity is not there. And it's a weird thing because it really felt like he was making some strides last year. And some of that scheme for sure. But a lot of it is just like reading, reacting to blocks and making the tackles, which we're seeing Kaiser White doing. We're seeing Drew Tranquil doing. So it's just a little weird for Kenneth Murray right now. He had the shoulder injury, of course, and the surgery. So maybe he's not healthy. Maybe it's kind of impeding some things. Maybe he's not trusting himself. We don't really know. Just, we're on the outside. But I would love to see more of Drew Tranquil. I would love to see more of Kaiser White, especially in this particular game where you're going to need these linebackers to cover. And that's not really Kenneth Murray's strong suit, similarly to Denzel Perryman. So if they kind of unleash Drew Tranquil this week, I think that would make a lot of sense. And I'm not saying like make him a starter, but give him 25 snaps And that can come from a number of different ways. It doesn't have to come directly from Murray, right? But, I would like to see Drew Tranquill on the field more often going forward, but specifically in this game against the Chiefs.
Yeah, I've talked about Justin Jones and Jerry Tillery ad nauseum, and so I'm not going to do it again. My biggest storyline is actually the return of Derwin James versus Travis Kelce. I think you could put that X Factor matchup wherever you want to put it, but the last game that Derwin James was active for after he came back from the foot injury in 2019, he did pretty much hold Travis Kelce to 3 receptions for 24 yards. Obviously, if you look at the production of Kelce in Chargers games where Derwin James doesn't play, it's quite a bit higher.
Yeah.
So I think Derwin James playing in this game is going to have a huge impact, regardless of what the rest of the Chargers defense is doing. Just to have him as that kind of chess piece on the field to potentially take somebody like Travis Kelce out of the game is so huge. And this is his first Chiefs game really in 2 years. So it's going to be awesome to see him out there, to see him, well, I was going to kind of do the Tyler thing where I say, oh, it's Derwin James and Joey Bosa, but Joey Bosa is the DNP for the second straight day. So we don't know. But I am excited to see Derwin James out there if he ends up being out there. And so that's going to be fun to watch with him versus Travis Kelce.
Yeah, there's definitely some DNPs. Brandon Staley said he was being cautious with some of these players. Obviously, you're hoping that Derwin James and Joey Bosa are those players. But it is going to be, electric to watch. I think, we all saw the highlights from Derwin against George Kittle in practice. And, we've got to see, Derwin James go up against Keenan Allen in practice. We've got to see him go against CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper last week. So the Chargers are obviously, in a much better spot if Derwin is healthy. And we can talk about the rest later on. I think the biggest storyline for me that I'm really interested in is really the chess match that's going to be happening between Brandon Staley and Andy Reid. I think this is a really interesting battle of styles, if you will, because Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, they want to chuck the ball 50 times a game. They want to chuck it downfield. And that's what Brandon Staley's defense is designed to stop. We saw the Cowboys last week really lean into their running game, really lean into the quick passing game. And not to say that the Chiefs can't do that same thing, but their running game is nowhere near as good as the Dallas Cowboys with Zeke and Tony Pollard and all those guys. The offensive line is still gelling. So this could be a game for them to really kind of unleash that. Obviously, the Chargers run defense is not in a great spot, as we've alluded to. But I think the Cowboys kind of showed everybody how teams could potentially, go up against Brandon Staley, going forward, because everybody in the offseason, it was all, how are teams going to combat Brandon Staley's defense? How are they going to handle his scheme? What's going to happen with Joey Bosa? What's going to happen there with James? And well, the answer right now is if you run the football effectively, you're probably going to win. So that's just not really the Chiefs' MO. It hasn't really been ever since Patrick Mahomes became the starter. So I'm just really interested to see the kind of adjustments that happen between these two genius coaches. I think nobody is going to argue that Andy Reid is a great offensive mind. Brandon Staley seems to be a great defensive mind. So it's just going to be really interesting. Obviously, this is probably me nerding out over the X's and O's, but it really is like such a fascinating matchup and a fascinating clash of styles, because it really does seem to be like good versus good. Alex mentioned Derwin James versus Travis Kelce. Like, this is the game that somebody could realistically stop the Chiefs. But if the Chiefs come out and hand the ball off to Clyde Edwards-Helaire 25 times this game, maybe we see a different kind of game. We're all expecting points, I think, but I don't know. It's just a really fascinating coaching matchup, and I just can't wait to see it play out.
I was just going to say, I think you mentioned kind of the Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill thing. Like, the margin for error in these games is so small to the point where it's like, man, that first Chargers-Chiefs game last year, Tyreek Hill was kind of getting locked up the whole game. And then he has that one big play where he gets over Chris Harris and it's a touchdown, and suddenly the Chiefs are back in front, right? So, like, you can do everything right against this Chiefs team and still find a way to lose the game like the Chargers did last year. So it's just one of those things where, if you're watching Derwin James and all these guys, they can ball out. And Michael Davis has been very good this year. He could lock up Tyreek Hill, but it all takes is really one play.
Yeah, I'd love to see this defense limit the big plays, and really also can they stay disciplined enough for the entire game? And last week there was a potential interception. Dak had fumbled, and there was the ball, hit the turf. Can they get those takeaways when the opportunities present themselves? Because you got to play perfect against the Chiefs, and they barely give you really any plays to take away. And I guess I don't know if this is true, but I read somewhere that the Chiefs have scored 31.5 points per game with Mahomes. So they're really need to go. They're going to need to step up their game from 18.5 points a game so far this year.
Yeah, and we'll definitely talk more about the red zone offense, later on. But the Chargers operation has not been super smooth right now. I think all of us could agree on that. And this is a game where it has to be essentially perfect to keep up with the Chiefs and potentially beat them. All right, any final thoughts on the biggest storylines before we move on to the injury reports?
Nope.
Okay, let's get to it. So, obviously, a lot of stress on Twitter today, seeing Joey Bosa and Austin Eckler and Chris Harris and Derwin James and Justin Jones and Kenneth Murray all on the injury report. Like I said, it seems like Joey Bosa and Derwin James were potentially getting, the precautionary treatment. Do either of you think there's a chance, though, that Joey Bosa does not play on Sunday?
I mean, there's a chance. There's a chance for anything to happen with two DNPs, as we saw last week with Justin Jones. I do think just looking at these injury reports and every Staley report we'll see going forward is kind of in like the Bill Belichick vein of like, well, we're going to be cautious and also we're just going to try to fuck with the other team. Or at least that's what I've seen through these first 2 weeks. So I do think Joey Bosa and Derwin James will play. Justin Jones, I'm a little unsure about because he's been a DNP for 2 straight weeks now. Doesn't seem like Chris Harris is going to play. So I guess with evaluating these injury reports going forward, you do have to take the cautious kind of sports performance nature of the Chargers now compared to what they did in the past. But I definitely think it's concerning that there's still this many names on the injury report. But I ultimately do think most of those guys will play.
I think where we expected right now is where it's going to end up. Joey Bosa and Derwin James will play. Justin Jones probably, but not in full capacity. Harris Jr. not playing. I guess I'm concerned that Joey Bosa, I think this time last year, or at least the following week against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, he was already starting to get beat up. And by the time, week 5, week 6, week 7 rolled around, Bosa just had 3 or so injuries that really nagged him. So hopefully this is just kind of a minor thing. It seems like it's a minor thing, but then these things add up and eventually he gets kind of ineffective. So hopefully it's not too bad, but I do expect there's 2 biggest stars on defense to play.
Yeah, that I'll never forget that injury report from last year where it was like tricep, knee, back. And it was like, oh my gosh, what is this guy not going through at this point? But yeah, I do agree. I think he'll play. And if he doesn't play, man, like that is the worst possible matchup to miss for Joey Bosa. Is against the Kansas City Chiefs. So the Chris Harris thing is really interesting. It's definitely something to keep an eye on. I don't even remember him like getting hurt and like seeing him, walk out the field or anything. And now he's likely going to miss 2 games in a row. And then Justin Jones thing is a little weird too. Like he obviously did not come back in the game, but Brandon Staley said it was just a cramp. And now he's, probably missing 2 weeks in a row with a calf injury. So those 2 injuries are interesting. The plan with Chris Harris last week, or his replacement rather, was essentially putting Derwin James in his position. And then Alohi Gilman was playing deep safety. So I don't know if I don't want to see that happen this week too. Like I think Derwin James needs to be that chess piece. Like I think he really does need to be moving around and going against Travis Kelce and going into the slot and playing in the box safety. So it's going to be interesting to see if we get to watch more Keemon Hall this week, potentially more Trey Marshall. I would prefer them to kind of mix it up a little bit against this team and not just say, Derwin, okay, you're going to go play 70% of your snaps in the slot. Like, I don't know if that is really a recipe for success this week. Last week, I totally understand. Totally makes sense. But I want to see Derwin James in that chess piece role moving around. I think it's just better for the defense overall.
Yeah, one of the more impactful plays of the week last week against the Cowboys was when Derwin James wasn't in the slot. I don't recall where he eventually lined up. I believe it was sort of near the center, but they brought James on a blitz. So hopefully, yes, even if he is covering Kelce quite a bit, I hope they let him still do the other things that make him such a good defender.
Yeah, so I mean, I think just going forward with the Staley injury reports, it's pretty much all going to come down to what's their status Friday, which really sucks if you record a podcast on Thursday and upload it Friday morning, I'd like to mention one player who's not on the injury report that I have sort of concerned about at this point. Nasir Adderley just said he had a degenerating finger, and that's why he can't catch balls. So that's a little bit concerning because that's potentially arthritis. So I don't know. That seems like a bigger deal than maybe it got talked about on Twitter.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't even think about mentioning that today. So it's a little weird. Like we've seen so many football players, have the wanky fingers and go in different directions. I have that a little bit, but it's not, obviously I didn't play in the NFL, so it's different. But like if you're playing defensive back, like you kind of got to be able to catch the football. And we saw it was a very difficult catch, right? But he did drop an interception this past week. So he said he's working to find a way around it. And it's just kind of crazy to me that like this dislocated finger happened in college and is like 5 years later is still a thing.
Yeah.
Duke Manyweather also pointed out a play where Matt Filer got like his leg rolled up on. He completely bent over backwards, and he was wondering if that maybe contributed to some of the struggles that he thought Filer had in that game. But he was surprised that he toughed it out. So, I mean, maybe it's nothing. He's obviously not on the injury report, but it's something to monitor.
Well, he was on it. He is on it, but he's just as a full participant.
Never mind.
Okay.
So I don't know. I thought that Filer had a really good game, at least as a run blocker.
Mm-hmm.
So that is, something. And shout out really quickly to Steven Anderson and Donald Parham, both players that we were really concerned about, the blocking aspect of the tight end group. Steven Anderson and Donald Parham are blocking their butts off. Like they're really, really playing well right now in that capacity. Steven Anderson obviously came on the show, so did Donald Parham. So a little biased towards them.
That's why.
No, but in all seriousness, those two players are blocking very, very well, and just had to give them a quick shout out real quick.
Yeah,
absolutely proved us absolutely wrong. I don't remember who Tommy Tremble even is.
Tommy Tremble. Hey, you'll get to see Tommy Tremble tonight.
Oh, jeez, I'm not watching that game.
I'm watching Thursday Night Football.
Did you see that picture of Davis Mills today going around on Twitter?
Yeah, he's a dinosaur.
It's the only thing I'll watch of Davis Mills tonight.
Dude has a ginormous neck. All right, let's get to these key matchups and X factors. I apologize. It looks like my Wi-Fi is wigging out a little bit, but can you guys hear me okay?
I can hear you, no problem.
Yep.
Okay. Maybe just my screen's a little bit slow, but oh well. All right, let's talk about some key matchups and X factors. Obviously, Alex mentioned, Derwin James and Travis Kelce. So, Alex, where are you going for your first key matchup outside of that? Or obviously, you can talk about that some more. But where are you going for your first key matchup of the game?
I think my first key matchup of the game is really just going to be, we talked about it in sort of the beginning of the show, but Clyde Edwards-Helaire versus this run defense, right? We don't think of the Chiefs as, like the Cowboys or even like the Washington football team that they played week one as a team that's going to run downhill and sort of open up everything else through that. I don't know if they quite have the ability to do that yet, right? We've seen that offensive line is still coming together, and Edwards-Helaire is not exactly what Zeke and Antonio Gibson are. But, I mean, after seeing what the Chargers were last week on film, I'm sure the Chiefs have watched it. And, seeing that Justin Jones might potentially be out again, I have to imagine that's a thing that they attack, especially because the Chiefs are probably going to be playing this game from in front. Like the Chargers, I don't think there's a scenario where they run away with the game, right? I think this is a game where if the Chargers do win, it's probably in the fourth quarter, very much kind of a one-score game type environment, right? So I think the Chiefs will have the ability to run the ball the whole game if they want to. And so that's kind of my first key matchup, and how Jerry Tillery, Justin Jones, if he plays, Linval Joseph and Christian Covington and all those guys hold up against the run this week. including Kenneth Murray and Kaiser White, who had bad weeks against the run last week. It's just going to come down to that. So, the Chiefs, you do not want to give them the ability to run out the clock or pick up extra first downs on the ground when they're already going to kill you to some extent through the air.
If they want to run, have at it. I'm going to talk about this with Arjun pretty soon. Staley said himself, the quickest way to lose is to give up explosions in the passing game. It takes a lot of 4 and 5 yard runs to add up to a 50-yard pass. So, have at it. But again, I'll talk about that with Arjun. But still, yes, even though you kind of invite the run, please don't give up 5.5 yards per carry. Invite the run. Yeah. My key matchup is going to be anyone versus Chris Jones, depending on where they move him. Seemed like against the Ravens, they started first, second down, sort of along the edge, and then maybe on third down they put him along the interior. But I guess the last game there was only 1 sack, and it was from Daniel Sorensen, their safety. Otherwise, their pass rushers, Jones, Clark, and Reid, they only combined for 5 tackles and no sacks, which is not good at all. But whatever they do with Storm Norton, against Chris Jones, it'll probably be a lot of Storm Norton. But the Ravens did a really good job of kind of negating Jones. Stephen, with your interview with Caleb James, who covers the Chiefs, he details that a little bit. And to be honest, Jones didn't look that good as an edge rusher. Villanueva or even other tight ends were able to get their hands inside and really just extend and clamp him down. The Ravens were also used, again, this is very different. Justin Herbert is not Lamar Jackson, but the Ravens would freeze him with, read options, and he's just not that kind of experienced edge rusher to recover or win, or it's not really his game. They do trap blocks, and they would just throw a bunch of different things at him. So he has so many different responsibilities to maybe not make things confusing, but to at least make things difficult for him. And so he doesn't just have one job. I'm just going to pass rush, beat Storm Norton. It can't be that simple this game. So whatever they do, hopefully they change it up and make it very difficult for Jones, who is just not a traditional edge rusher. He doesn't look like one, so make it difficult on him.
Yeah, usually it's something in my background, but Tyler's got a dog and his vacuum going on, so it's
going great.
A fun night for him.
And my background's wigging out too. It's a good episode today.
Great stuff. I think Chris Jones and Storm Norton, that has to be kind of a key matchup, just because what Storm Norton are we going to get? I don't think we're going to get the Storm Norton that we saw against Washington, but I also don't think we're going to get the Storm Norton potentially that we saw against Dallas, right? If he has just kind of a game in the middle, I would take it at this point. Just give me one game with a 60 PFF grade, and I'll take that for as long as we can get it, So I think that's the most important thing. If he can just be sort of a passable cog as tackle, much like, say, Sam Tevi was in some games last year. That's sort of my expectation for Storm Norton at this point. And I think he's capable of doing it, right? I mean, they moved Chase Young over, and in the second half, he was primarily going against Storm Norton. So, if there's somebody that can do it, I trust Storm Norton more so than the other backup offensive line options, or, putting Filer there and then getting weaker in the middle. But this is going to be sort of the kind of get off the pot game for Norton, I think, a little bit. If you do allow another 10 pressures, I'm not sure how much longer Staley can go on with it,
Oh, if he allows another 10 pressures, yeah, okay. 9, 10. I'm fairly positive that Sam Tevi never allowed more than 8 pressures in a game. That's really bad. I think his issues against Micah Parsons are definitely correctable. And Joe Lombardi was saying, you don't have any tape on Micah Parsons. I'll give you a little bit of a pass. If you had given up 6 pressures, I would have been okay, that's fine. I understand that. But 9, 10 pressures, 11 was the first count. You got to be better than that. So, I agree with Alex that if he's passable this game and passable for the next few games until Brian Bulaga is back, or if Brian Bulaga is back, then obviously that will help out. So I think my key matchup of the day really is Justin Herbert versus Tyrann Mathieu. And I understand a lot of the red zone gripes right now, and I understand that Justin Herbert is playing very, very well. But there are some things in the red zone that are happening with Herbert that are not, frankly, getting enough heat. I think he's had a few plays, particularly when he's bootlegging left and, waiting and waiting and waiting for somebody to get open, and he's waiting 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 seconds long. And then he just makes a poor decision. His interception to William Jackson was a poor throw. His interception in the red zone was a fluke, I guess you could say, because Keenan Allen had tripped. But he's missing people in the red zone too. Like Jared Cook had Jalen Smith on him, and Jared Cook had 2 steps on Jalen Smith, and Justin Herbert threw the ball behind him. Like, I think Justin Herbert is very, very good at what he does, and I think that the Chargers have their guy. We've all been very positive about Justin Herbert, but this is not a game where Justin Herbert can be any kind of off. Like, he's been a smidge off on a couple plays here and there, and it has cost this team. And you cannot be a smidge off in the red zone against Tyrann Mathieu, who last week in his first game coming back from COVID had 2 interceptions and returned 1 for a touchdown. So this is a tough matchup in terms of pass coverage. I think, Tyrann Mathieu, they're going to move him all over the field. But if Justin Herbert makes mistakes in the red zone, like, they're going to lose. And he needs to be better in the red zone. He said as much, and I think he will be up to the task. But this is a difficult matchup against Tyrann Mathieu for the things that Justin Herbert is struggling with, in my opinion.
That's a great call. I'm glad you're talking about Justin Herbert too, because upon rewatch, even just in the red zone, like you said, that miss to Cook, where at worst they end up on the 3-yard line if he hits him in stride. There's a play with Donald Parham in the seam where he absolutely misses him. Parham's waving his arm like, please throw it to me. A little bit of pressure on that part, and so he had to throw it to Eckler for a short gain. So it's not like they lost anything, but the touchdown was there, and you see them drawing up plays for Parham, and it's like, oh my gosh, there it is. And then it just doesn't work out because he's doing something else. A couple of predetermined reads, which isn't really on him. That's just the way the offense is styled right now. But throwing it to Mike Williams when somebody else might be, wide open and available, so yeah, he does have a lot of things to correct for sure. And, I mean, we kind of talked about him being off a little bit to start camp, not in any like egregious bad way, but just sometimes there's just something missing before it's not quite perfect just yet. And like you said, against the Chiefs, he had to be perfect. So he needs to be able to convert, find his guys, go through his reads. And yeah, even that sack penalty, or the sack call, which wasn't a sack, it was stupid, but he never should have been in that position to begin with. He should have thrown that ball away, and we never would have been talking about it if he just threw that ball away. So, I mean, it is what it is, but he has to improve in those areas.
Yeah, I mean, I also think taking the temperature of the game is kind of an important thing too. And like we talk about that interception to KZ, like that was on 3rd down, right? I think in that one. And so
I believe so,
yeah, throw the ball out of the back of the end zone. If nothing's really open, then you get 3 points, and suddenly the Chargers, I think, would be up 17-14 instead of the Cowboys driving down for a field goal and then the Chargers having to tie and kind of play from behind. So obviously you don't want to settle for field goals against the Chiefs, but I think just kind of knowing what the situation of the game is and when to take a risk, I think that's going to be kind of really important in this one too.
Again, I'm not saying that Justin Herbert has been playing bad. He's been playing mostly very fantastic. It's just these little bits and pieces here and there that he has struggled with. Mm-hmm. And like we've said it a bunch already, like against the Chiefs, you have to be perfect. You cannot give the Chiefs extra possessions by turning the ball over in the red zone. And a lot of these red zone issues have been fluky, but like Justin Herbert needs to be better in the red zone too. And whether that is making better decisions, placing more accurate passes, running with his legs and creating some things that way, checking protections. Like it all adds up when you're playing the Chiefs. Like you can kind of get away with some things here and there against the Cowboys and against the Washington football team. But if Herbert makes mistakes in the red zone and they're kicking field goals or turning the ball over, like they will lose, and they'll probably lose by double digits. So that's really how it comes down to for me. You've got to be aware of where Tyrann Mathieu is, whether he's playing safety, playing Jalen Guyton in the slot, manning up against Keenan Allen, playing dime linebacker. Like he is their Derwin James. Like, and you have to be aware of where he is. And if you're not, he's going to make you pay.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to the X factors. I'll kick this topic off here because I think the X factor for me is Austin Eckler and Larry Roundtree. And obviously we know that Austin Eckler is very, very good. So I'm going to mostly talk about Larry Roundtree here because the way that Joe Lombardi talked about their red zone issues today made me think that this is going to be a kind of game where we see more action for the running backs. And obviously, one of the things that everybody knows who pays attention to football knows is that once you get down to the red zone, everything gets tighter. There's more traffic and spaces and passing lanes. There's more bodies that you can throw back there. it's much easier to put 3 guys at the end zone line and play, like a passable defense. So I think the way that they can kind of solve some of their issues is running the football, and the offensive line is blocking very, very well right now. I mentioned Steven Anderson and Donald Parham. So I think this is a game that we could and should see more action out of Austin Eckler and Larry Roundtree. We saw a little glimpse here and there in the first week of Larry Roundtree. We've seen glimpses of it in the preseason. I think if he gets, 8 to 10 carries, I think he could score a touchdown in this game and really give this red zone offense a boost that they really desperately need at this point.
Yeah, because it really does seem like on some occasions I don't want to say they don't know what to do, but there's sometimes it sounds like, all go towards the end zone, but they won't have like any running back leaking out of the backfield, or they'll run, I don't know, something else. And it never seems like they want to get running backs involved at that point. But then you watch the Washington football team drive, running backs were clearly involved, and they scored the touchdown, 2-point conversion at the goal line, scored the 2-point conversion. So yeah, I'd love to see running backs get involved. But apparently there have been 17 games that with Mahomes, the Chiefs have had where a running back has had somewhere between 4.5 yards a carry and like 8 yards a carry in that game. And of those 17 games, the Chiefs have only lost 1. So hopefully they contribute in the red zone and score more, because leaning on that run too much, I don't know how much they'll win.
Yeah. My X factor for this game is actually going to be Patrick Mahomes. And it's going to be specifically Patrick Mahomes versus Brandon Staley. I think that Gus Bradley was able to actually play quite a few good games against Mahomes, right? I mean, all of the Chargers-Chiefs games of, recent history have been fairly close, right? But one criticism that was, constant against Gus Bradley is he just refused to put a QB spy on Patrick Mahomes. And here's how the last 3 years Patrick Mahomes have played out in terms of rush yards per game. Not against the Chargers, just the whole league. 16.6 against the Chargers in the last 3 games. So this is the last 2 years because he didn't play in the final game last year. He averages 45 yards per game rushing. And a lot of these plays come on third downs where the Chargers are trying to get off the field, much like that Mexico City game in 2019, if people remember, and they just couldn't do it. So this is one of those games where I kind of look at Kenneth Murray and I say, hey, if you're not kind of playing great right now, this is maybe one of those games where you want to use him as a QB spy, just track the passer, kind of do your thing. Just take care and remove that option from the Chiefs game, because, if you are on 3rd and 4 and are trying to get a stop on the Chiefs, you just cannot get beat by Patrick Mahomes using his legs. You could get beat by him throwing through the air. Everyone gets beat like that. But it's just kind of one of the more inexcusable things in these recent Chiefs games have been the Chargers just allowing Mahomes to stay on the field and often in games be the leading rusher with his legs. In 2 of the last 3 Chargers-Chiefs games, Patrick Mahomes has been the leading rusher on his team, which is just kind of a disgusting stat. So for the love of God, Staley, please use a quarterback spy.
I like that. I like that X factor. That's unique, and I'll think of something like that moving forward. It's a good one. I'm going to go with my X factor being Donald Parham. We sort of already talked about him, so not really much more to talk about. They drew up red zone plays for him. Shots past the 30. He's wide open for 1 touchdown that Herbert missed. He caught another touchdown pass that was called back. Can he get involved? He's also going to be tasked with blocking Chris Jones at some point. So yeah, he's my X factor for the game.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the tight ends in general, just I think the biggest weakness of the Chiefs defense is the linebacker room and these safeties that are not named Tyrann Mathieu. So, this could be a good game for, the running backs and tight ends in passing situations. All right, let's move on to our bolt predictions. This is where we have had some failures and some successes on this podcast, trying to be a little bold, trying to be a little out there. If you want to blame anyone for the last week's score, you can blame Tyler. But let's get a little bold in this situation. Obviously, it's all fun and games, just busting Tyler's balls. Alex, why don't you kick us off with your first bolt prediction?
This is tough. I'll say Jalen Guyton 2 touchdowns. I think we've seen Jalen Guyton not get involved This feels like a game where he could finally get involved if the Chiefs maybe struggle with a little bit of deep coverage. Obviously, Tyrann Mathieu will be moving all around the field a lot, but those other safeties that Steven has brought up are pretty inexperienced. So if you can hit Jalen Guyton on that one big play, like this is kind of the game to do it, as opposed to some of the opponents that they have coming up. So I'd love to see Jalen Guyton get involved this game. I called Jared Cook for 2 touchdowns last week. He got 1 taken away, so it is what it is. So I'll take Jalen Guyton, 2 touchdowns. One of them I think will be maybe a closer sort of to the red zone touchdown, but I do feel like we're sort of overdue for one of those Herbert 40-yard bombs at this point.
Yeah, and it's important to point out that like the Chargers offense is taking shots down the field.
Yeah,
They're just not, going to Jalen Guyton, which is what we're used to. They're not going for 50-yard touchdowns, but they are going down the field. So that's the important thing. Oh, do we get to see the dog tonight? Hey,
yes. There, she was barking, so I'll just hold her. Hello.
Oh yes, that's so cute. There's the X factor for the game. Glad
exactly.
What's the dog's name? Ganondorf or whatever?
Not even close.
What's the dog's name?
Galadriel, but thank you. Did you assume my dog's gender?
Ganondorf? Oh my gosh, that's not even a character.
Ganondorf is from Zelda. Yeah.
Okay.
It was fantasy related. You were close. Thanks.
Close.
So my bold prediction. Let's move away from that. My bold prediction is going to be that Joey Bosa has 3 sacks this game. Doesn't sound very bold, but I do think, by golly, he needs to have a good game. Not that he didn't play poorly last game, and just he kind of got shut down by both scheme and what the Dallas Cowboys were doing. This game, they want to push it deep. Joey Bosa is going to have 3 sacks. And you know what? Just because I'm awful at these bold predictions, and it always ends up being the opposite, I'll say this. Patrick Mahomes has 700 yards.
So now he's going to have, 250 or something?
Easily.
Oh, there we go. So last week I said Asante Samuel Jr. gets his first career interception. That happened.
Very nice.
Was very pleased with that. Asante played great. Shout out to everybody who voted for him for Rookie of the Week. For a team that doesn't have fans, the Chargers players sure win a lot of fan vote awards. So really excited about that. I think my bold prediction. Ooh, let's see. Where do I want to go with this? I think we see Austin Eckler over 150 scrimmage yards and 2 touchdowns this week. I think we see a huge day from Austin Eckler, both because, frankly, I think we'll see him rush the ball more. But I also think the Chiefs' defense is in a bad spot up the middle with their linebackers and their safeties, again, outside of Tyrann Mathieu, who is one of the best in the league. But I think we see a big game from Austin Eckler. We saw him be a little bit more involved last week. There were a couple really bizarre plays that were kind of like screenish and nobody was out blocking for him. So if we can just cut that shit out and actually use him down the field like he was more often, I think that prediction will come true. So I think I'm going to say over 150 scrimmage yards and 2 touchdowns for Austin Eckler.
I feel like we're going to be right this time. I really think we are.
There we go. We'll probably get 1. So, frankly, if we could get Joey Bosa 3 sacks, I think that's probably the one that I would want most to happen. I think that would really be the most detrimental to the Chiefs winning. So, if that's the one that comes true, I'm very happy.
Bold prediction: the Chargers don't win by 20 points.
19.
It was a good 19. There we go. All right, we're gonna move on to some of our league-wide picks for today. Tyler, somehow I forgot to mix up the order, so Tyler has gone first 2 weeks in a row. He has taken the lead. Shout out to the Steelers and everybody else that I picked last week for really sucking it up. So I am currently losing. I know some people were like saw us talking about the jersey thing. So we have a bet at the end of the season. Whoever is in first place with these picks is going to get a jersey paid for by the other 2 of us. So right now, Tyler is in the lead, and then Alex, and then me. So Alex gets to go first. Alex, who are your 2 winners and then your underdog that you are picking to win this week?
Just to update the standings, Tyler is 4-2. I'm 3-3. Steven is 1-5 after a parlay from hell involving the Steelers, I think the Bengals, and also the Saints last week. So it wasn't the best for him. But I do get to start this week. So, like Tyler did last week, I'm taking the 2 cupcake games off the table. Give me the Cards over the Jags and give me the Broncos over the Jets at home. Those are the 2 sort of easy ones this week when it comes to the overdogs. My underdog, so the Rams actually started as the betting favorites over the Buccaneers, but now they are a 1.5-point dog at home to the Buccaneers, which is a little bit, or 2, is it 2 points? Or is it 1.5?
It's 1.5 still, 1.5.
1.5. Okay. So they're 1.5 point to the defending Super Bowl champions at home, and I'm gonna take the Rams. I think that Matt Stafford's looked really good. This defense is probably, good enough to keep up with that, Tom Brady offense that's looked really good these first 2 weeks. So I'm gonna take Matt Stafford and the Rams as my underdog.
Very good, Alex. Very good. So I am going to start this off. I'm going to take the Tennessee Titans over the Indianapolis Colts. That feels like kind of a gimme to me, with the way that the Colts are banged up, when suddenly Carson Wentz can listen to doctors, which is great for him and his mental health. So I'm going to take the Titans over the Colts. I'm going to take the Saints over the New England Patriots. Feel like this is a kind of a get right game for Sean Payton, who, I know they killed the Packers in the first game, but they haven't really been able to move the ball consistently. So I think this is kind of a get right game for Sean Payton and Drew Brees and Alvin Kamara. So I think they get the win over the New England Patriots. And then my upset of the week, I was pretty surprised at this line. The Buffalo Bills are currently favored by 8.5 points over the Washington football team. And frankly, the Buffalo Bills offense has really struggled to move the ball consistently, similar to the Saints. But I think this is a game that is pretty sneaky. I would definitely take the points for Washington covering that margin. But I am going to pick Washington as my upset of the week over the Buffalo Bills, a team that I picked to go to the Super Bowl. So this is a pretty big upset for me.
Wow, you guys really gave me some easy ones. So I'm going to take the Browns over the Bears. Thanks for that one. And then I'm going to take the Raiders over the Dolphins, who do not have a quarterback and they have no offensive line. So those are going to be my 2 picks. I go Browns and Raiders. God help me. And then for my upset pick, I think technically the Packers are underdogs to the Niners. Maybe it's the opposite.
Yeah.
It's pretty close.
Yeah,
but I don't want to take one that's that close, because I really could see the Packers beating the Niners. So I can't tell if this is going to be hilarious for me or hilarious for Alex. I'm not sure. I'm going to take the Eagles over the Cowboys in this one.
There we go. Someone had to do it this week.
We've had an Eagles pick every single week so far. So someone pick them again next week. That'll be fun. Maybe it's my turn next week. So
I
that's
just want to say really quick on the Carson Wentz thing. I've seen the Colts fans going through the stages of grief. So now they're just like, oh, well, this offensive line isn't healthy and everything's not on him anymore. And I'm like, oh, man, that's so fall 2020 for me. But so have fun with that.
Yeah, your mental health is great, Alex, because you don't have to watch Carson Wentz anymore.
It's so great.
All right, let's get. Oh, I forgot to change the thing. Whoops. Oh well.
To the campaign. Whoops.
All right, let's do our predictions for this Chargers and Chiefs game. Tyler, why don't you kick us off with your final score prediction and who you have winning? I think this might be a little depressing for our listeners, but let's have at it.
Yeah, today I got to be depressing for our listeners, and I'm sorry, but I don't see the Chargers correcting all of their mistakes and everything going their way in the span of a week. Could the Chargers beat the Chiefs? Absolutely. Do I think it's going to happen this week? No, I just don't think they're cohesive enough, clean enough right now. And without Balaga, but without Harris Jr., potentially without much of Jones, I think they can keep it close. I don't believe in this Chiefs defense, and I never really have. But I do think that a takeaway here, missed field goal there. Chiefs end up winning. So Chargers are going to lose this game 24-30.
Yeah, I think this is kind of going to be a close game throughout. I don't think that the Chargers are really going to get blown out. I actually see it kind of being higher scoring, but maybe as close as the Cowboys Chargers game was all throughout last week. I do have the Chargers taking the L here, however, just because I think this Chiefs team has such a high margin for error, and the Chargers currently don't. That's really the difference between these two teams. The Chiefs can afford to not convert on a red zone trip because they'll have 5 more and probably wind up with touchdowns. That's just the state of their offense right now. I need to see a little bit more from the Chargers offense, certainly more than the 18.5 points per game that they're averaging, or sorry, the 18 points per game that they're averaging before I, kind of really am going to take, no, is it 18.5? I think it's 18.5, whatever. I really just need to see more than that for me to pick them in this kind of high profile, matchup where the Chargers are going to have to score at the very least 30 to come away with the win in this sort of environment. So that's just it for me. It's a bummer, but to be honest, to me, the goal for the Chargers at this point should be just to get into the bye at 3-3. Like, if you can find a way to beat the Raiders and find a way to beat one of the Browns or Ravens, I think that that's kind of acceptable going into the bye. So it would be great to get this win against the Chiefs. Kind of sucks they didn't get the win against the Cowboys because that was the more winnable game, in my opinion. But yeah, so I have them taking the L here. But like Tyler said, I wouldn't be surprised if they won, just because the Chargers have been playing very close games with the Chiefs ever since Mahomes took over. I think the largest margin for a game was actually Mahomes' first game where the Chiefs won by 10 points. So other than that, they've all been pretty much one-score games. So I think this is a game where Brandon Staley kind of can, do some moves that, sort of out-chess Andy Reid. But I think the Chargers are a little bit too banged up. And I don't really trust their margin for error. And a lot of the stuff that we saw last week, I don't think will be corrected in 1 week, like Tyler said.
Yeah, if you had asked me this, prediction a couple of weeks ago, I probably would have picked the Chargers. This is a game that I thought, when the schedule came out, that they could have won, or they still can win. But there are too many issues right now for me to feel comfortable in predicting a win over the Chiefs. Of course, like my co-hosts have said, like the Chargers absolutely have the talent to win this game. And if they do, we'll be very, very happy. But I think until they really kind of figure out some of these issues, the red zone offense, the, not slanting the same ways and clogging up running holes on your own and all these different kind of issues, and, not having 10 plus penalties and all these fluky ways to not score touchdowns, I just can't pick the Chargers to beat the Chiefs right now. So obviously we're all hoping to be wrong in this kind of situation. I do agree with Alex. This is going to be a close game. The Chargers are really the team that has played the Chiefs the closest in terms of margin of victory, at least in the AFC West, that is. So I think the Chiefs will win. I saw one prediction on NFL Network that it was going to be 38-21. That's just complete garbage. So I'm going to say the Chiefs win 27-21. So
I'm actually just now realizing I didn't say a score in my long ramble. So I'll say Chiefs 33, Chargers 30.
Okay, so a lot of points for Alex. It is funny though. Last week we were all predicting a 30-point game, and it was 20-17. So just how football works sometimes. All right, so that's gonna do it for us today, guys. Tyler, Alex, any final thoughts before we head out for the day?
Sorry for the background noise.
It's all good. We all have stuff from time to time. It's all good. Alex, any final thoughts, man?
No, just thanks you guys for watching the show as always, and hopefully we'll have a very happy post-game stream and we're all wrong and the Chargers beat the Chiefs.
Yes, absolutely. We're always rooting for that to happen. As always, make sure and like this video, comment and let us know what you think. Comment about how cute Tyler's dog is and how precious that little puppy kisses was. As always, leave us a rating or review. We do really appreciate all the positive feedback. And please go support our sponsors, whether it's TickPick, Manscaped, Buster Sportsbook, Quest Designs, the Backroom Collection, or Chicky Wings and Sports. I know that they are hosting a Die Hard Bolt Club event on Sunday, so go check them out. Thanks for tuning in, guys, and we'll see you next time.
I love that little dog, Ganondorf.